Donkey Kong Bananza is a game I've been waiting for a very, very long time. And not just the years viewers of this channel that have heard me banging the 3D Donkey Kong game drum for the past few years, no. This goes way back to my earliest memories. When I say that, there's an asterisk to this story being that I was the baby of the family at the time, before my younger brother came along. And we had consoles in the house that were there before I was born, like a Sega Genesis that I have very vague memories about, but I don't really remember, if that makes sense. The first console I can remember playing as a kid was a Super Nintendo, the SNES 101 model to be specific. My grandma mailed to my mom for me and my siblings to play when I was like 4 or 5 years old. It came with a few games. We had staples, of course, like Super Mario World, The Legend of Zelda Link to the Past, Mario Paint. I played so much of that fly swatting game. Super Effects, you know, the classics. But above all of that, the game I played the most was Donkey Kong Country. I remember this game being the last non-Wii related game I used to play with my mom. Diddy Kong specifically was my GOAT. I say all of that to say I love this franchise, but that love has weakened as my taste in games has evolved, but the franchise kind of stagnated. Don't get me wrong, the rest of the original DKC series was great, and Retro's revivals on Wii and Wii U were phenomenal, but I always wanted something more. I wanted something that feels as major to me now as those games did for me then. Donkey Kong Bananza so far has delivered, and it's so much more than I even imagined it would be, even with these seemingly high, unrealistic expectations. Fellow Donkey Kong enjoyers, like, comment, subscribe. That way you'll see all future Bananza videos I have planned. Trust me, I have a lot of ideas. Also, if you notice this cool hand-drawn Donkey Kong Bananza wallpaper, you can get it yourself if you become an 8-bit member on shop.watchredirect.com. Okay, let's get into the video. Going into Nintendo Switch 2's reveal, there were a few things I was fully convinced would happen. One of which is we would see a new Donkey Kong game. Wasn't sure it'd be 3D, but just figured there was way too much smoke for no fire for DK love. And then there's the things I just knew wouldn't be a thing, and Super Mario Odyssey 2 not happening was at the top of that list. I got a lot of stuff right, but I am willing to concede the latter prediction is wrong, at least in my heart, because Donkey Kong Bananza is absolutely the next logical conclusion for Super Mario Odyssey. That's true in every way imaginable, from gameplay to lore to the look of the game, with there being allusions to New Donk City, the outfits we see DK wear throughout the trailer, the similarities of the golden bananas to Odyssey's moons, and some other stuff that we know from unofficial sources I won't be talking about here. Even more promising than all of that, in my opinion though, is this game seems to be celebrating Donkey Kong's history in a similar way to what Nintendo did for Mario's in Super Mario Odyssey. We see allusions to OG DK, to the Rare era, all the way to Retro Studios era. I'm super excited to see what they come up with to stitch all of this together, and I have a sneaking suspicion that it may even tie all the way back into the Mario world in a relatively subtle way. This game is obviously gameplay first all the way, but there's absolutely a treasure trove of lore for people to dig into. Speaking of digging and gameplay, the gameplay in particular doesn't give me Odyssey vibes, really. This game was absolutely inspired by the Switch era of Zelda as well, and that's where I think a lot of the unique elements of the gameplay come into play to me. Of course, there's the more surface level stuff like the greatly expanded scope, the ability to climb most surfaces and shield, or in this case, turf surf. And then there's the more involved similarities being the shrine inspired challenge courses. All of this is true and plays into the Breath of the Wild comparison, to be sure, but more than any of that, what Donkey Kong Bananza shares with Breath of the Wild is the core of their DNA and how that formula is applied to the Donkey Kong series to make something so familiar in so many ways feel so foreign and new at the same time. A major tenet of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is the flexibility predictability they afford players in their gameplay. And Donkey Kong Bananza is carrying that torch into yet another Nintendo franchise in a way that is so wonderfully on brand for the series and Nintendo as a whole. And this is perfect for me because what I love most about Nintendo is their view of technology usually results in their next generation games recontextualizing tech we've seen in games for years to create gameplay experiences we haven't seen before it. Despite that, it's yet another modern example of Pikmin only existing because of GameCube's increased ability to render characters. In Breath of the Wild, they use their increased processing power to make a massive world with interconnected systems. Tears of the Kingdom went even further and added depth to the scope of the world and added additional sets of interconnected systems by way of fusible weapons. With Donkey Kong Bananza, it's the massive destructible environments. Obviously, plenty of games have destructible environments. This isn't even new for Nintendo platforms. What is new though is how well integrated these destructible environments are into the core of the gameplay, rather than it simply being visual flair to flex for the sake of flexing. Bananza's environmental destruction, much like the open world of Breath of the Wild, is a natural extension of the world of Donkey Kong. Like, of course, Donkey Kong is a minor in the franchise that has become synonymous with its minecart levels, and the gameplay is equally as inspired in a similar way to Breath of the Wild in the sense that it's not only learning from its own history, it's taking notes from other popular games as well. Which, side note, these younger developers clearly grew up playing, loving, and wanting to leave a mark on the games in their life, and that approach has spawned some of the best games ever made in recent history, and Bananza is continuing that trend. To name an example, Bananza has a Minecraft-like hierarchy system for materials where you can break through the terrain, pick up the ensuing debris, and use that to break through stronger terrain. And not just that, but in true Breath of the Wild fashion, different terrain can bring with it different properties and thereby interact differently with DK in the world around him. You do all of this in pursuit of the aforementioned golden bananas, in addition to a brand new currency dubbed Banandium, a material that's presumably used for upgrades and maybe unlocking other areas of the map. Things like that, we'll learn more when the games are in our hands. The important thing to take away from this though is all of this destruction is then reflected on the world map unless or until the player decides to reset the damage done. Another impressive showcase of Switch 2's processing power, to be sure, but it's also very useful to have such a detailed map of the full scope of the playable area with the additional context of how the player impacted it added in real time to the map. I'm sure people will do cool stuff with that creatively on social media. I'm also sure people will do curse things with that feature as well, but I will choose to focus on the happy thoughts. Additionally, we've already seen that DK's abilities evolve to some degree with the addition of the Odd Rock affording the player the ability to sing, which is essentially a sonar ability. Will Odd Rock get more abilities, or will DK? Do the different outfits and or accessories have any influence on gameplay? We at least know the minor helmet you get in the beginning of the game had a functional headlight, but do other outfits do anything? Maybe increase effectiveness when handling specific materials, for example? I'm sure there will be more gameplay abilities one way or another. I just don't know how frequently that will happen, and if/when it does happen, will those abilities be for DK, Odd Rock, a combination of the two, or could we see other parties entirely add to our abilities in some way? Interesting things to learn in the future. Curious to know what you all think in the comments. My absolute favorite thing about this lineage in modern gaming is neither of the aforementioned examples let their legacy hinder them in any way. Super Mario Odyssey didn't need to try to be prettier Super Mario 64. It took what made Mario 64 great and applied those lessons to a game developed in the modern era by people who have played that game and games it inspired, made in the interim both inside and out of Nintendo, to come out on the other end with the best game possible. The same is true to an extreme degree with Breath of the Wild. Zelda became a shadow of itself, chasing after people's adoration for Ocarina of Time, and Breath of the Wild reclaimed that franchise's agency and identity by making the starting point Zelda's world, themes, and characters, and worked from there to arrive at what gameplay mechanics are possible today that fit fit the series rather than the strict gameplay template of an older game from the 90s. For so long, the leadership in these development teams have allowed people's love for past games and the franchise dictate their direction. I'm happy to see that power dynamic shift back in favor of the creatives, because listening to fans has stagnated most of these franchises. And above all, these developers realize that games are supposed to be fun. We're not in the arcade era. Games no longer need to be developed in a bend over backwards to acquire a taste of torment sort of way, but rather they need to be developed in a way that the game rewards the player for having said fun. Far too many games take the shortcut to making games feel fulfilling by making aspects of the experience frustrating to make the reward the ending to that frustration. Or to put it more nicely, they present an arduous journey for a rewarding destination, but games like Breath of the Wild and now Donkey Kong Bananza make the journey a reward in and of itself. The game is fun because it is fun, not because it's able to trick your brain into thinking you achieve something difficult. And that's not to say these games aren't a challenge either. The key is to not delay gratification to cut corners on actually making a satisfying experience. In other words, many have been conditioned to think that the time it takes to beat a hard boss or figure out a difficult puzzle adds to the satisfaction of solving it. But in reality, that's all just conditioning. Not everyone gets a dopamine hit from that. Statistically, most people get turned off entirely and never finish the game for this reason. Developers should want you to want to finish their game and reward you for playing it, not punish you. So hell yeah, let me break through every wall to get to that golden banana, or give me an interesting puzzle to get there in a way that's fun and engaging to figure out. The former doesn't erase the incentive to create or seek out the latter. All it actually does is require the developer to create a game that's fun to play without the guardrails, and to ensure what guardrails do exist are worth engaging with outside of being relatively low effort solutions to add the necessary conflict to a game to make it a game. Rant aside, Donkey Kong Country Bananza continues these relatively new concepts being at the forefront of AAA games, and I will continue to scream from the rooftops until they become the rule instead of the exception. We should be free from design philosophies that were established to siphon quarters from children in arcades, especially now that we're paying small fortunes up front to have access to them in our own homes. Our relationship with games evolved. The way they are designed needs to as well. To spin back to what I said earlier in the video, the thing I'm looking forward to the most is seeing how all of this modern game design will mix with beloved elements of the existing franchise to create something uniquely new. Things that only exist in the way that they do because it's a game in the Donkey Kong franchise. And although neat, I don't really mean things like the side-scrolling throwbacks to the DKC games. Don't get me wrong, I love those games. They were a big part of my childhood, as I mentioned, but to me, the best part of nostalgia is the foundation it lays for new experiences. I love watching the evolution of things I've loved. I don't need constant direct cutaways to things I already experienced, so to me, things like the barrel cannons that assist you in blasting through the terrain are exciting, not because they're just barrel cannons and ooh, look thing I know, but because they change the context of them to fit modern games, and I think that's just fun to watch and see evolve and happen in front of us. Or to even move away from gameplay a little bit, Cranky Kong directly acknowledging the Kong connection to the Mario universe. Any and all returning characters and potential derivatives to learn what modern tech does for their AI, as well as seeing any potential design updates or how expressive they are, because DK has already set such a high bar in that department. I'm excited to see if any other franchise staples find their way in with similar evolutions to fit the new gameplay. Like, are animal buddies in this game at all? And if they are, which ones? How do they work? Where is Diddy Kong? Like, I know they essentially reclaimed DK from Rare with the new design and everything, but it's not like they're abandoning that era entirely. Like I said, Cranky's here, so Diddy Kong could show up. And if he does, what will he do? I can't say I have hope for him to be playable given the existence of the Odd Rock and its role in the gameplay taking a similar role to what I'd expect to see from Diddy Kong. I can only really hope we see him in a similar capacity to the aforementioned Cranky Kong, and hope that he gets his true shine later somehow, maybe in a sequel, maybe in an expansion, something like that. But that's enough with the mysteries. What I do know for a fact is that there's a photo mode. I don't have much there to add to that. It's just a top tier feature to have as a thumbnail creation enjoyer, and is generally an instant massive plus for me in any Nintendo game. Thank you to Redirect executive producer Trev L. Steinberg and all of the other great names you see scrolling on the screen for making this video possible. If you'd like to join them in the credits or in receiving any of the other perks, which you can find at shop.watchredirect.com. You can also be added to the video credits for free if you have a Twitch Prime sub that you have laying around. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, share it with a friend that you think might enjoy it, follow on social media, look at all the links in the description. Okay, that's it for me. See you in the next video.